What if everything you've ever asked for has already been answered? What if asking isn't a request sent upward, but an agreement whispered inward? This audiobook is about why the universe always says yes and how to finally let it in. Ask, and it is given. Introduction. The sacred promise that has never been revoked. Ask, and it shall be given unto you. A promise carved into Scripture, passed through prophets, echoed in temples, whispered in prayer. But what does it really mean? To ask and to receive. Is it just a metaphor for hope? A feel-good phrase meant to soothe the desperate? A line repeated so often it's lost its weight? Or is it a law? A spiritual equation buried in plain sight? One that governs all creation, from galaxies to gardens, from miracles to moments? This audiobook is an invitation back to the original vibration of that phrase. Before it was softened by doctrine, before it was trimmed for comfort, before we learned to ask with doubt instead of conviction. Because the truth is, you're asking all the time. Not just with your words, but with your mood, your focus, your assumption, and your emotion. And life is always answering, not always in language, not always in form, but always in frequency. The gap is not between you and God. The gap is between your desire and your embodiment. This journey is about closing that space. It's about unlearning the idea that you must prove yourself worthy. It's about remembering that asking is not groveling. It's choosing what version of you will rise, choosing what reality you'll meet, choosing what timeline your soul is ready to occupy now. Asking is alignment. Receiving is permission. This isn't just a spiritual idea, it's a spiritual law. And once you begin to understand the mechanics of thought, of feeling, of state, of vibration, you stop waiting for life to grant you things and start walking as one who already has them, not to fake it, but because you know what you've asked for is already yours. The field has already rearranged. The answer has already taken shape. Now it waits for you to match it, to claim it, to become the one who receives without resistance. So let us begin. Let us return to the asking, not as beggars, not as orphans of the divine, but as creators, as sons and daughters of the field, as imagers of the unseen, as those who no longer knock, because the door is already open. Chapter 1. The Power of the Ask. Desire is not a sin, it's a signal. Desire has been misunderstood. Some were taught to fear it, to bury it beneath obedience, to tame it with guilt and call that virtue. But desire, pure, soul-born desire, is not sin. It is signal. It is blueprint. It is divine communication in the language of longing. You ask not only with words, but with your wanting. The moment something stirs inside you, a dream, a picture, a possibility, you are not being tempted. You are being invited into the next version of yourself. invited into a deeper alignment, invited into the life that already exists in the field, waiting for your permission to arrive. Desire is not a test of your discipline. It is a map of your expansion. And until you learn to stop shaming what you want, you will continue delaying what is already yours. You cannot receive what you resist. You cannot claim what you secretly believe is unholy. Desire is the opening act of manifestation. It's how the invisible begins whispering to the visible. There's more. There is more joy, more beauty, more expression, more wholeness, more of you trying to be born through the experience of asking. So ask boldly. Ask without apology. Ask without the mask of false modesty. Because here's the truth. The size of your desire does not intimidate the universe. The only thing that causes delay is your belief that your desire is too big, too late, or too selfish. But your desire isn't too much. It's too accurate. It's revealing the next edge of your becoming. Let's break this open even further. When you desire something, it's not just about the thing. It's about the state you believe that thing will bring. You want the love because you crave to feel seen. You want the money because you desire freedom and choice. You want the success because you want to stand in your power without shrinking. The desire is a surface. The state underneath is the truth, and that state is always available now. Because asking is not begging for a future outcome. It's tuning into a now frequency where that outcome already exists. You ask not to summon the thing. You ask to summon the you who already lives inside it. So what if you stopped looking at desire as distance? What if you started seeing it as proximity? Not a gap, but a guide. Not a void, but a compass. Because that's what it is. Desire is not the voice of greed. It's the voice of God echoing through you, saying, "This is the path. Follow it inward. Follow it upward. Follow it home." Desire is holy. So let go of the guilt. Let go of the old sermons that told you to shrink in order to be worthy. Let go of the idea that spiritual means empty-handed. You were not put here to want less. You were put here to remember who you become through your wanting. You do not have to chase. You do not have to force. You only have to ask, purely, honestly, reverently, and then align with the version of you who no longer begs for what they already are. So now the real question is, can you ask without fear? Can you ask without shame? Can you say, with full body clarity, "I want this. I'm ready. I say yes." Because the moment you do, the wheels begin to turn. Not because the universe suddenly approves, but because you stopped blocking the delivery. You were never waiting for life to give. Life was waiting for you to ask without resistance. Because desire is not just a spark. It's the ignition. It's the starting line. It's the sacred language of your next chapter, saying, "You don't have to earn me. You only have to welcome me." Chapter 2. The source that hears instantly. Why you've never asked in vain. You may have whispered it in silence. You may have screamed it through tears. You may have asked without words at all, only through the aching pulse of your heart. And still, you were heard. Every ask, no matter how small, how messy, how delayed, was received in full, because the source that responds to asking does not operate in human time. It does not wait to hear the right phrasing. It does not require you to kneel in the perfect position or offer your request with polished clarity. The source responds to essence, to vibration, to frequency. It knows what you mean even when you don't know how to say it. It knows what you're asking for, even when you're asking from pain. It knows what your soul is longing to experience before your mind can give it a name. This is the mystery that religion tried to capture with symbols, that mystics hinted at in riddles, that prophets glimpsed and poets tried to describe. There is a field of intelligence beneath what you can see, touch, and control. And it does not delay. It is not trying to decide if you're worthy. It is not keeping score of your past. It is not comparing you to someone more spiritual or more disciplined. It simply receives. And once it receives, it begins to rearrange everything in response to the signal you've sent. The question then is never, did the universe hear me? The question is, can I stay aligned long enough to meet the answer when it arrives? You see, we often confuse silence with absence. We think that if something hasn't appeared in our hands, it must not have reached heaven. But the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Sometimes the answer is already on the way. And what you're calling delay is simply divine choreography. Sometimes the answer is in a different form than you expected, and what you're calling unanswered is actually redirected. Sometimes the answer is immediate, but your ability to receive is not yet open. And so you wait, not because you're being ignored, but because you're being prepared. Neville Goddard once said, "Your faith is your fortune, not your timeline, not your credentials, not your external effort. Your faith, your ability to dwell in the unseen, to feel it real, to know you've been heard, is what unlocks the invisible door." The source does not delay, but we delay our own alignment by asking and then worrying, by desiring and then doubting, by praying and then rehearsing lack in the next breath. But here's what's truer than your fear. Every genuine ask begins a process in the field. It sets off a sequence, a vibration, a rearranging. People start moving. Ideas begin forming. Opportunities shift in your direction. You may not see it yet, but the universe is already in motion. There is no such thing as an ignored ask, only a misread timeline. You think nothing's happening, but everything is. And the moment you return to trust, you resynchronize with the delivery. So trust this. There is a source that does not forget, a spirit that does not overlook, a divine intelligence that hears the deepest parts of you. Even when you don't know how to speak them, your role is not to micromanage the outcome. Your role is to keep your vibration clear enough, still enough, open enough to let what's already yours arrive without interference. Because the answer is never lost. Sometimes it's slowed by your doubt. Sometimes it's dressed differently than you imagine. But it is never denied. And every time you return to stillness, to gratitude, to expectancy, you speed its approach. You do not need to keep repeating your ask. The source did not miss it. The field did not forget. You ask once. You align daily. You receive when your inner world is finally willing to let it in. So let it in. Let go of the question marks. Let go of the begging tone. Let go of the feeling that you need to earn your own prayer. Because the moment you asked, you were answered. And now, the rest of the journey is learning how to meet the answer with a heart ready to receive. Chapter 3. Why you don't receive immediately. The gap between asking and aligning. There is a space between asking and receiving. A sacred pause. A silence not of denial, but of preparation. This is the gap. And in this gap, most people lose their way. Not because they weren't heard, not because their desire wasn't worthy, but because they misinterpret the stillness as absence and the delay as rejection. But here's the truth that changes everything. The moment you ask, it is given. But it can only arrive through the doorway of your alignment. And alignment takes trust. It takes unlearning. It takes becoming a vibrational match for what you've already claimed. This is not punishment. It's precision. The universe will never give you something you're not ready to hold. Not because you're being tested, but because you're being tuned. What feels like delay is often grace. What feels like nothing happening is actually everything rearranging behind the veil. In that space, the gap, you are being invited into your own becoming. Because receiving is not passive. It's not sitting and waiting with hands folded. It's becoming the version of you who can walk through the open door without collapsing under the weight of what they once begged for. To truly receive is to become. And becoming takes time, or more accurately, it takes readiness. You don't attract what you ask for. You attract what you are in resonance with. That's the law. That's the rhythm. So if your ask hasn't arrived, don't assume it's lost. Ask instead, am I living in the frequency of having, or still rehearsing the emotion of lack? Am I trusting the process, or trying to control the pace? Am I open to how the answer shows up, or still demanding it appear in one form only? This is where most people unknowingly slow the delivery. They ask from one state, then live from another. They ask from inspiration, then walk in doubt. They ask in meditation, then fear in traffic. They ask in ceremony, then question everything the next morning. But your vibration is your vote, and the field responds to your sustained state, not your momentary spark. So the gap isn't a void, it's a mirror. It's showing you everything you're still holding that isn't in harmony with what you've asked to receive. Fear, impatience, unworthiness, attachment to form, The universe doesn't withhold to punish. It waits for coherence. Alignment means that your body, your thoughts, your expectations, and your actions are all saying the same thing. It is mine. I am ready. I walk as one who already knows. Neville Goddard called this living in the end, not waiting for evidence, but assuming the position of fulfillment. Because the law is this: when the inner world is settled, the outer world reflects. So if the outer hasn't shifted yet, the work is not to force it. The work is to soften within. Not to grasp, but to open. Not to strive, but to align. Sometimes the gap is asking you to rest. Sometimes it's asking you to release. Sometimes it's asking you to become the steward of your desire, rather than the one still begging for it. The delay, if there is any, is only the distance between your ask and your embodiment. But that distance is not punishment. It's protection. Because the universe, in its infinite intelligence, will not place your answered prayer in hands that still tremble with doubt. It's not being withheld. It's being held until you are steady enough to receive it without breaking your own flow. So let the gap be sacred. Let it be the fire that burns away the excess. Let it be the silence that sharpens your hearing. Let it be the cocoon between the version of you who asked and the version of you who now becomes the answer in motion. You are not being ignored. You are being refined, because what you've asked for is real. And it's close. Closer than your fear. Closer than your history. Closer than the voice that says it's taking too long. Hold your alignment. And soon, what you asked for will feel so natural, you'll forget there was ever a time you lived without it. Chapter 4. Receiving without earning. Letting go of the worthiness complex. There is a subtle lie that lingers in the heart of even the most spiritual seeker. I must earn what I ask for. It doesn't always speak in those words. Sometimes it hides in action. The overgiving, the overthinking, the need to prove yourself before you feel allowed to receive. It sounds like, let me just fix myself a little more. Maybe I need to meditate harder. If I were truly spiritual, I wouldn't want this at all. And just like that, you delay the arrival of what's already yours. Not because you lack power, but because you're unconsciously placing your desires behind a gate labeled only if I deserve it. But here's the truth that breaks the illusion. The universe is not transactional. It doesn't reward effort. It reflects state. What you receive has nothing to do with whether you've earned it, and everything to do with whether you're aligned with it. Your worth was never up for debate. It was never meant to be part of the equation. The field doesn't ask if you've done enough. It only asks, are you being the one who matches what you've asked for? That's not morality. That's mechanics. Take, for example, a child who wants to play in the rain. They don't stop and ask if they've done enough chores today. They don't question whether they've earned joy, laughter, or delight. They run toward it, arms open. Because somewhere deep within, they still remember. You don't need to prove yourself to receive beauty. Now imagine an adult with a dream in their heart, to write a book, to start a healing practice. to attract a loving, supportive partner. But instead of moving in alignment with that vision, they shrink. They tell themselves, once I'm more healed, once I've suffered enough to be worthy of the reward, once I've given more than I've asked for. And so they circle. They wait. They silently delay their own receiving, because they believe their value must be proven first. But the universe doesn't operate on guilt. It doesn't speak the language of shame. It only speaks energy, vibration, state. It mirrors not your history, but your now. So when you live in the state of, I am not enough yet, you cannot receive what belongs to the version of you who knows they already are. Let's shift the story. Take, for example, someone who has always struggled with money. They've worked hard, lived frugally, and done all the right things. But abundance still feels distant. One day, they sit quietly and ask a deeper question. What if my belief that I must hustle to be worthy is the very block that's keeping it away? And so they stop trying to prove. They stop tying their value to exhaustion. They begin allowing small pleasures again. They begin walking as the version of themselves who no longer equates struggle with virtue. Soon, opportunities begin appearing. Ideas flow with ease. Support finds them. Nothing outside changed until they did. They dropped the complex and stepped into the current. This is what receiving looks like. Not climbing a ladder, but sinking into permission. Permission to be supported. Permission to be blessed. Permission to receive without a resume of suffering. Because grace is not a reward, it's a remembering. The old paradigm said, you'll get what you want when you deserve it. The new paradigm says, you'll get what you want when you align with it. Alignment is not about being perfect. It's about being honest, being energetically true, being open enough to let the blessing land. That may look like rest. That may look like joy. That may look like no longer explaining yourself before saying yes to something beautiful. You are not here to prove your goodness. You are here to embody your enoughness. And when you do, you'll find the field is already holding everything you asked for, waiting not for your effort, but for your permission. So say yes. Let the answer in. Receive not because you've earned it, but because you are finally willing to believe you don't have to. Chapter 5. The frequency of receiving. Feel it first, and it is yours. Everything you want already exists. Not in the distant future, not hidden behind layers of hard work, but here, now, vibrating on a frequency you may not yet be tuned to. The question is never, is it available? The question is always, am I available to it? The law is simple, not easy, but simple. You receive not according to what you ask for, but according to what you feel as already true. Your emotions are not just responses, they are frequencies, and each one, joy, gratitude, certainty, fear, doubt, places you on a channel that broadcasts your inner world to the field of form. The field doesn't respond to the words of your prayer. It responds to the feeling behind it. You say, "I want abundance." But what are you feeling? Tightness, desperation, anxiety. Then that's the frequency being registered, and reality will mirror it back with more reasons to feel the same. This is not punishment. It's precision. To receive what you asked for, you must begin to feel as though it has already arrived. This is the shift. This is the difference between asking and receiving. Receiving begins when your nervous system starts rehearsing peace, before the circumstances change, when your body starts walking with certainty, before the outcome has shown up, when your inner world becomes so saturated with the frequency of having that the outer world has no choice but to respond. Take, for example, a woman who desires love. She writes it down, meditates on it, prays for it. But in her daily life, she continues to feel unworthy, guarded, disappointed. She isn't wrong. She's just out of tune. The love she wants exists, but she's not feeling her way into alignment with the version of herself who receives it. Now imagine she begins shifting her emotional signature. She starts softening. She starts trusting. She begins walking, speaking, and dressing as the version of herself who knows she is already loved, not by someone else, but by herself. That shift, that inner recalibration, sends a new signal, and life responds. It's not about pretending, it's about practicing. Practicing the feeling until it's not foreign anymore, until it becomes natural, until it becomes yours. Neville Goddard made this the cornerstone of his teaching. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Feel it real. Live from the end. You don't wait for the money to feel secure. You feel secure, and the money arrives. You don't wait for the answer to feel peace. You feel peace, and the answer finds you. This is the frequency of receiving. To live from the vibration of already having, not from the waiting room of desire. And yes, this takes courage, because the world will tempt you to believe only what your senses show. But your senses are delayed feedback. They are the echo, not the source. Your feeling is the source. And the more you stabilize the frequency of what you've asked for, the faster it must appear. Not because you forced it, but because you matched it. Take another example. A man longing for purpose. He asks the universe, "Show me what I'm meant to do." But he walks through life numb, uninspired, disconnected. He keeps waiting for a lightning bolt to strike. One day, something shifts. He begins treating every small task, making coffee, answering emails, walking through nature, as sacred. He starts to feel grateful, not for some grand revelation, but for the opportunity to exist with intention. And that feeling opens the door. Suddenly ideas come. Synchronicities follow. The purpose he asked for wasn't delayed. He just hadn't tuned to the frequency where it could meet him. You don't receive what you beg for. You receive what you become. So let this be your practice. Every day, ask yourself, what would it feel like to have what I've asked for? Can I let that feeling rise in me now? even for a moment? Can I visit that emotional landscape often enough that it begins to feel like home? Because once it feels like home, you'll arrive there effortlessly. You'll wake up one day, and the thing you once longed for will be inside your life, inside your hands, inside your breath. Not because it was finally given, but because you finally tuned in. And the universe, faithful as ever, will simply say, "You remembered how to feel it, and so now you get to live it." Chapter 6. The Unseen Answer. Sometimes the answer looks like silence. You asked. You felt it deeply. You aligned. And still, nothing came. No voice in the sky. No miracle on the doorstep. No lightning bolt of clarity. Just silence. And in that silence, the mind begins its familiar chant. Maybe I did it wrong. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. Maybe the answer is no. But what if the silence isn't rejection? What if the silence is the answer? Or at least the beginning of it? The ego rushes to fill the quiet, but the soul listens. It understands that just because you can't see movement doesn't mean there isn't momentum. The universe doesn't always answer in language. It answers in orchestration, in rearrangements, in people exiting, in dreams softening so new ones can rise, in doors closing that you never would have had the courage to shut on your own. This is the unseen answer. Take, for example, someone who prays for clarity in their life's purpose, but after asking, all they feel is fog, no epiphany, no roadmap. Then slowly, without fanfare, certain responsibilities begin to dissolve. A job opportunity falls through. A relationship grows quiet. The structure of their old life begins to loosen, making space for something they didn't know they needed. At first, it looks like nothing. At worst, it feels like loss. But it's not punishment. It's preparation. The answer wasn't withheld. It was unfolding behind the veil of your expectations. Sometimes, the answer doesn't show up in what arrives, but in what leaves. And if you're too busy listening only for yes or no, you'll miss the subtler reply. Not yet. Something better. This way instead. The truth is, the universe speaks in more than words. It speaks in timing, in quiet redirection, in inner shifts you didn't know you needed, in the patience required to outgrow the version of you that asked from limitation. What you perceive as silence might be the space the answer needs to become real. You ask for peace, but the answer first brings you into situations that reveal all the ways you create chaos. That's not absence. That's alignment in motion. You ask for abundance, but the answer shows up first as a lesson in trust, as an invitation to heal your relationship with receiving. Again, not absence, not delay, but divine calibration. We were taught to expect fireworks, but the real magic of the universe is subtle. It's layered. It doesn't shout. It rearranges. And if you don't honor the quiet, you'll walk away before the miracle has time to bloom. There is a soft knowing that grows in the stillness. I don't need to chase the answer. I need to hold the frequency. Because that frequency, steady, grounded, unwavering, is what bridges the invisible with the visible. And the moment you demand form to validate your faith, you shift out of it. But when you can sit in the silence and still know, I am heard, I am held, I am becoming the one who receives this fully, then the answer starts to take shape. You may not know when, you may not know how, but you'll feel it coming, in the way your body softens, in the way your doubt fades, in the way your inner world becomes the place where the answer already lives. Take, for example, someone who asks for deep healing. They expect a dramatic release, but instead, over weeks or months, they begin noticing new thoughts, different choices, a quiet courage they didn't have before. That's the answer. Not loud, but real. Sometimes the answer arrives not in a package, but in a process. And the most powerful thing you can do is trust it anyway. So if you are in the gap, if you are in the stillness, if you feel the echo of your asking, but not yet the substance, breathe. You have not been forgotten. You have not been denied. You are being shaped. So that when the answer does arrive, you'll be able to recognize it and rise to meet it fully. Because silence is not the absence of God. It's often the fullness of God moving in ways your logic hasn't caught up to yet. And when you do catch up, you'll look back and whisper, that quiet season wasn't empty. It was everything preparing me to receive. Chapter 7. Ask again, but higher. When the asking evolves into becoming, there is a point on the spiritual path where you realize the way you asked before, it's not the way you're meant to ask now. Not because your desire was wrong, not because your prayer was ignored, but because something in you has expanded. And from this new space, you're being called to ask again, but higher. Higher does not mean louder. It does not mean more desperate, more passionate, or more elaborate. It means cleaner, quieter, more aligned, less entangled in the identity of the version of you who asked from fear. Because you see, most people's first asking comes from contraction. I need this so I can feel safe. I want this so I can finally feel worthy. Please give me this so I can know I matter. That asking isn't wrong. It's honest. It's human. But it comes from a self who still believes that having the thing will fix the feeling. The higher asking, the evolved asking, comes from the version of you who knows that the feeling must come first. That joy doesn't come from the relationship. Joy makes space for the relationship. That peace doesn't come from the outcome. Peace becomes the environment in which the outcome appears. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is vibrational wisdom. You can ask from pain, but eventually you must ask from truth, because the universe responds not just to what you ask for, but to who is doing the asking. So the invitation is this: refine your asking, not to become worthy of more, but because your new identity now sees things differently. Take, for example, someone who once asked, "Please help me escape this job I hate." That prayer may open doors, but the version of them who is still in resistance, in bitterness, in blame, will carry that energy into the next chapter. Now, imagine they evolve into a deeper state of self-leadership. They begin to ask, "Show me how to serve from joy. Align me with the path where I feel alive and supported." The ask has changed, not because the destination is different, but because the energy behind the ask has matured. And when the energy matures, the answer accelerates. You begin to skip timelines. You begin to move from inner clarity, not outer panic. You begin to ask from the version of you who already lives in the field of fulfillment. Neville Goddard said, "Change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live." And so, your asking must evolve as your conception of self expands. Sometimes, you're not waiting for the answer. The answer is waiting for you to update the identity from which the question was sent. So ask again, but this time, as the one who already knows they are whole. Ask again, but from peace, not panic. Ask again, not because the first one failed, but because now you're ready to ask from power. Power not as force, but as clarity. This is why life brings us full circle. We ask for healing, and along the way, we realize we must become the healer. We ask for love, and in the waiting, we become love in human form. We ask for purpose, and through the silence, we remember. We are the purpose. So if the thing you asked for hasn't arrived, ask again, but do it without the layers, without the proving, without the smallness of your former self. Ask from the knowing that you are now the fertile ground in which the answer can take root. And when you do, you may find that the desire itself has changed, not disappeared, but sharpened, refined by the fire of waiting, purified through your own expansion. Now the ask is no longer a question. It's a declaration. It's no longer a reaching. It's a claiming. It doesn't tremble. It knows. And because it knows, the field must respond. Because when you ask from your highest self, you no longer chase what you want. You become it. And everything else comes rushing in to meet you there. Chapter 8. Living as the answer. You stop asking when you start walking. There comes a moment on every spiritual journey when the asking stops. Not because the desire has vanished, but because the alignment has arrived. You no longer need to repeat the prayer because you've become the one who carries its fulfillment in your breath, your posture, your presence. You've stopped waiting for the answer because you are now walking as it. This is not pretending. It's not performance. It's embodiment. You've remembered that the most powerful ask is the one that dissolves into being. You stop saying, "Please let it come." And you start living as if it already has. That shift from seeker to vessel is the final transformation. It's what turns hope into knowing. It's what collapses timelines. It's what tells the universe I am no longer asking for this. I am now walking as the one who receives it. And when that becomes your state, reality softens. The mirror clears. What once felt far away meets you exactly where you are, because where you are is now a match. Take, for example, someone who spent years asking for healing. They did the work. They aligned. They waited. Then one day, without fanfare, they stopped needing to get better. They simply began living as someone already whole. They made decisions from that space. They spoke from that space. They no longer needed proof, because their body, their energy, became the proof. That's the shift. That's what it means to live as the answer, to speak as the one who already knows, to move as the one who no longer doubts, to give thanks not because you hope it's coming, but because you know it's already here. When you reach this stage, you don't stop desiring, but your desires are no longer fueled by lack. They are fueled by expansion. You don't ask from the ache of emptiness. You create from the joy of being full. And that shift is everything. Neville Goddard taught, claim it until it becomes natural. Assume it until it feels like memory. The final phase of receiving is when the desire no longer feels like a future, but like a fact. It's when you don't just visualize it. You normalize it. You wear it. You walk it. You become the environment where it's already true. And life, ever responsive, begins to bend around your embodiment. It sends people who treat you like the version you've stepped into. It presents choices that would have never appeared in the old frequency. It builds a new world around the new you. Because once you stop looking for the answer, you start recognizing yourself as the portal through which it moves. You stop waiting for the light. You realize you are the light. You stop chasing confirmation. You become confirmation. You stop praying from the mountain's base and begin speaking from the summit. This is the place where receiving becomes natural, where your nervous system has caught up with your vision, where your state of being is no longer hoping, it is knowing. And from this space, you ask less, but receive more, because you no longer signal need. You signal readiness. And readiness, true, embodied readiness, is irresistible to the field. So if you find yourself still asking, ask one last time and mean it. Then stop asking. Start walking. Live as the one who already holds it. Speak as the one who no longer doubts it. Move as the one who has remembered what's always been true. That the answer is not out there. It's you, and you've become it.